My name is Larissa. I'm 29 and last Christmas changed everything. For years, I watched as my younger sister, Ksenia, received the lion's share of our parents' attention and generosity. As a graphic designer paying her own bills, I was proud of my independence, but it still stung. That December, I was driving to my parents in my rickety foreign car, and in my purse I had a special lottery ticket, their gift. I couldn't even imagine how this ticket would change my life when Yusha got a brand new car and I got socks. This scheme was barely noticeable at first. Our parents, Anatoly and Galina, never openly singled out Ksenia, but their actions spoke for themselves. When I got straight A's at school, they nodded approvingly. When Yusha got C's, they celebrated with ice cream. When I got into college on a partial scholarship, they seemed pleased. When Yusha was accepted to a local college, they threw a party. "We're just so proud of both our girls," Mom would say when someone pointed out the discrepancy. Dad added, "Larissa has always been so independent. She doesn't need extra support like Yusha." That was their excuse. I was independent, self-sufficient, mature beyond my years. It sounded like a compliment, but it became an excuse to pay less attention to me, provide less support, and yes, allocate fewer resources. After graduating with honors from the graphic design department, I got a job at a marketing firm in St. Petersburg. The salary wasn't exceptional, but it was enough to rent a small one-room apartment a half-hour drive from my parents' house. I bought my own furniture, paid my own utilities, and managed my student loans without asking for help. Meanwhile, at 26, Yusha was still living at home. She took correspondence courses at a local college, worked part-time at a boutique downtown, and spent most evenings hanging out with friends. Her parents paid for her education, gave her pocket money, and never asked her to pay rent. "Your sister is still trying to find herself," my mother explained when I hinted at the unfairness. My 10-year-old car had been giving me trouble for months. 3 months before Christmas, I spent almost 150,000 rubles on repairs, money I had been saving for a vacation. "Maybe it's time to think about a new car," Dad suggested during Sunday dinner in November. I explained that I couldn't afford a car loan while paying off my student debt. "You'll figure it out," he said, patting me on the shoulder. "You always do." Despite everything, I was looking forward to Christmas. Family is family, and I truly loved them, even with their flaws. I spent weeks searching for the perfect gifts, despite my limited budget. For my parents, I continued our tradition of giving a lottery ticket, but this year I forked out for one of the holiday tickets for 1,500 rubles instead of the usual 500. For Yusha, I made a set of handmade earrings and a matching necklace. The trip to my parents' house on Christmas Eve took almost an hour instead of the usual 30 minutes. My car protested the entire way. When I finally pulled into the driveway, the house was already bustling with life. Before I could even get my bags out of the trunk, the front door swung open. "Larissa's here," Mom called, waving energetically from the doorway. The house smelled of cinnamon, pine, and roast turkey, the smell of childhood Christmas that always made me smile. Dad came out of the living room with a glass in his hand. "Here's my girl," he said, hugging me with one arm. "How's your car holding up? I see you got here in one piece." I barely admitted, shaking the snow off my boots. In the kitchen, Aunt Jana immediately embraced me in her scented embrace. "Look at you, all grown up and businesslike," she said, "and still driving the same old car." I saw her puffing on the driveway. Uncle Grigory chuckled. When Yusha showed up, late as usual, she was greeted with enthusiasm. "I'm here," she announced, as if her arrival were the official start of Christmas. "And I brought dessert from Severmitropol." Dad emerged from the living room again, this time with a much more enthusiastic greeting than I had received. "Here's my Christmas angel." Yusha, with her perfectly coiffed hair, designer jeans, and expensive coat, looked like she had stepped out of a Christmas catalog. At dinner, when I tried to tell her about the exciting new project I was working on, Uncle Grigory quickly interrupted me. "Speaking of design, Yusha, did you mention that you were thinking of taking some art classes next semester?" he asked, effectively turning the conversation to my sister. Oh yeah, I think maybe I should major in graphic design, Case Yusha said, looking at me. Larissa makes it so fun, and I've always been creative. Mom sifted it out. Professor Case Yusha said she had a natural sense of aesthetics. I took a big sip of wine, remembering my straight A's in my major and the internship I had worked on while getting my diploma. But I said nothing. As dinner was coming to an end, Case Yusha mentioned that she was having trouble with her business course. I just don't understand why I need economics, she sighed. It's so boring. College isn't all fun, honey, Dad said, but his tone was gentle. Well, don't worry, Mom and I have talked and we're thinking. Maybe you should cut back on your workload next semester. No need to push yourself. I almost choked on my pie. When I studied and talked about the difficulties with a difficult course, my father simply said, "Hang in there. That's what studying is all about." The discrepancy was becoming more glaring by the minute, and the evening had barely begun. In our family, the main event was always the evening before Christmas. After dinner was cleared away and dessert was served, we would gather in the living room to exchange gifts. The living room had been transformed into a holiday wonderland. The 7-foot tree twinkled with decades of white lights and decorations, a fire crackled in the fireplace, and Christmas music played softly over the speakers. Outside, snow continued to fall, creating a picture-perfect Christmas card scene outside the large window. Dad had taken up his position as the tree, assuming his annual role as Father Frost and handing out presents one by one. As always, from youngest to oldest, he announced, a policy that meant that Case Yusha had opened hers before me for our entire lives. I sat on the windowsill, slightly apart from the main circle, my glass of wine giving me liquid courage for what I suspected would be another exercise in disguised disappointment. The red envelope containing the lottery ticket felt heavy in the pocket of my sweater. Dad began handing out gifts. When it was time to open mine, I watched nervously as each recipient unwrapped their present. The photo album for the parents was met with approving nods, but quickly put aside. "We'll look at it later, dear," Mom promised, already reaching for the next package. The handmade ornament for Case Yusha earned a quick thank you from Sister Mila before she moved on to the much larger package from our parents. In contrast, Case Yusha's gifts, expensive perfume for Mom, a set of premium whiskey for Dad, designer scarves for the aunts and uncles, were met with exclamations of delight and repeated thanks. I knew without asking that our parents had financed these gifts from Case Yusha, as they did every year. Then came the moment for me to open my gifts. From Case Yusha, I received a standard bath set, on the bottom of which the discounted price tag was still partially visible. From my parents, I unwrapped a pair of fluffy socks, a gift card to a coffee shop for 2,500 rubles, and a knitted hat. "Thank you," I said, trying to sound grateful. "The hat will definitely come in handy." "It's wool," Mom noted. "I know how cold your apartment gets in the winter." I nodded, thinking about how I kept my thermostat low to save on heating bills. My parents knew about it because I mentioned it at Thanksgiving. Neither of them offered to help with the heating bill, even though they were paying all of Case Yusha's utilities. "And now," Dad said with a dramatic gesture, "I think there's another special gift in here somewhere." He pretended to look behind the tree, then pulled out a small box wrapped in silver paper with a dainty blue bow. "Oh, here it is," for Case Yusha from Mom and Dad. The room went silent as Case Yusha accepted the small box, her eyes widening in anticipation. She carefully removed the bow and unfolded the paper, revealing a velvet box stripped to the jewels. When she opened it, instead of jewelry, there was a single car key lying on the satin lining. She looked confused for a moment. Then realization dawned on her face. "It can't be," she whispered, looking at our parents. "It can't be." Mom was already crying. Happy tears were streaming down her face. Dad was beaming with pride. "It's outside," he said. "Merry Christmas, Princess." The congregation moved en masse toward the front door. Dad pulled it open, revealing a brand new SUV in the driveway, adorned with a huge red bow on the roof. The snowfall provided the perfect backdrop for the gleaming white car. It's a Lexus NX, Dad announced proudly. All-wheel drive for safety, all the latest features, and great fuel economy. Yusha screamed with delight and ran out into the snow, not even bothering to put on a coat. The family followed, admiring the features of the car, while Yusha jumped into the driver's seat and began to explore the interior. I stood frozen in the doorway, unable to move. The contrast was so stark it was almost comical. Fluffy socks and a gift card for me, a luxury SUV for my sister. My ancient car sat just a few meters away from Yusha's new Lexus, looking even more pathetic in comparison. No one seemed to notice that I was not joining in the celebration. They were all gathered around the car, watching Yusha adjust the mirror seat and test the sound system. I quietly stepped back into the house, my chest tightening with emotion. In the empty living room, discarded wrapping paper lay on the floor. I picked up my modest gifts and put them in my duffel bag. The red envelope with the lottery ticket seemed to taunt me from my pocket. I headed for the bathroom, locking the door behind me. My reflection in the mirror was that of a woman trying desperately not to cry. "Don't," I whispered to myself. "Don't give them that satisfaction." But the tears came anyway, hot and angry, streaming down my face as I sat on the edge of the tub. Outside, I could hear the continued cheering and delight, and the occasional honk of a car horn as Yusha apparently tested out her new toy. I stayed in the tub until I heard everyone come back inside. Laughter and excited chatter filled the house again. After splashing cold water on my face and fixing my makeup, I rejoined the gathering with a rehearsed smile. No one asked where I had been. Christmas morning was clear and cold. I barely slept, tossing and turning in my childhood bed and replaying the events of the previous evening over and over in my head. The lottery ticket remained in its red envelope. I was too upset to give it to my parents after the car incident. Downstairs, the family had already gathered for breakfast. Yusha was excitedly telling everyone about her plans for her new car. "I'm going on a trip to Moscow with my girlfriends," she was saying as I walked into the kitchen. "The sound system is amazing, and there's this cool feature that keeps you in your lane if you start to drift." "Safety first," Dad said approvingly. I nearly choked on my coffee when he added that they, of course, covered insurance. "You cover her insurance," I blurted out. There was an awkward silence. "Well, yeah," Mom finally said. "Insurance for new drivers and new cars can be pretty expensive." "She's 26, I pointed out. "I don't think she's a new driver." Dad cleared his throat. "Larissa, it's Christmas, let's not talk about it." I took a deep breath, trying to contain my rising emotions. "I'm just trying to understand. You, Yusha, buy a brand new Lexus and pay the insurance while I drive a car that's falling apart and get socks for Christmas. But that's not fair," Mom objected. "We gave you both the gift card and that cute hat." "It's not the hat," I said. My voice was quiet but tense. "It's the inequality, the fact that you always gave Yusha more. More support, more gifts, more everything. Yusha needs reliable transportation to study, defending herself," Dad said. "And you're doing well on your own." "That's right," Mom quickly added. "You're so independent, Larissa, we're proud of that." "So I'm being punished for being responsible?" I asked, putting my fork down. "And what exactly is Yusha being rewarded for? For living at home at 26? For finishing a 2-year program in 6 years? The tension in the room was almost palpable. "I think I'll go home early," I announced, getting up from the table. Within 20 minutes, I was saying a dry goodbye to the hallway. I walked out to my car, threw my bag in the back seat, and put the key in the ignition. Nothing. I tried again. The engine made a clicking noise but didn't start. "Perfect," I muttered, resting my forehead on the steering wheel. A knock on the window made me jump. Dad was standing there. "Car trouble?" he asked. "Looks like it." He spent a few minutes examining the engine, then closed the hood with a decisive thud. The battery was dead, and from the sound of it, the starter was about to die too. "Do you really need to take better care of this car, Larissa?" Something inside me snapped. "Better take care? Dad, I've been putting every spare penny into maintaining this car. I work full-time, I pay my rent, my student loans, everything. Meanwhile, Ksenia lives here for free, and you just bought her a Lexus. Dad's expression hardened. And that's different, your sister needs help more than I do. I finished for him. Why? Because she was never encouraged to stand on her own 2 feet. The front door opened, and Mom and Yusha appeared on the porch, drawn by our raised voices. I can drive you home in my new car, Yusha offered with something that seemed genuinely kind, but under the circumstances, sounded smug. I laughed, a harsh, mirthless laugh. Of course you can, that would be the perfect end to this Christmas, wouldn't it? The successful daughter was driving home, being dropped off by her favorite in her brand new Lexus. Larissa, Mom gasped, how can you say such a terrible thing? Isn't that the truth that no one in this family wants to admit? I was screaming now, spilling out my hoots, holding back my frustration at him. For as long as I can remember, Yusha has had everything handed to her on a silver platter, while I've had to work twice as hard for half the recognition. That's absolutely not true, Dad countered, his face turning purple. We've always treated you girls the same. The same? I took out my phone and opened the calculator. Let's count, Dad. Last year for Christmas, Yusha got a MacBook Pro, designer boots, and a trip to Moscow. Approximate cost 250,000 rubles. I got a sweater, a scarf, and a gift card. Approximate value, 10,000. Sound the same? What hurt me most was not that, but the truth, which I now clearly saw. The truth is, I continued, my voice became quieter, that Yusha is failing her exams, isn't she? That's why you bought her a car and another bribe and another attempt to motivate her when she should be motivating herself. The shocked look on my parents' faces confirmed my suspicion. Enough, Dad said firmly. Larissa, you're upset about the car, I understand that, but that attitude is completely inappropriate after everything we've done for you. Everything you've done for me, I repeated incredulously. Dad, I paid for my own education with scholarships and loans. I found an apartment, bought a car, built a career myself. What exactly have you done for me lately? I call a taxi and say, I grab my phone again. While I wait for the ride to be confirmed, my hand touches the red envelope in my pocket. A lottery ticket. I pulled it out in anger. It was supposed to be a Christmas present for Mom and Dad, I explained. Almost defiantly, I began to scratch the protective layer with my fingernail. The symbols appeared one after another, 3 identical snowflakes. Then 3 identical bells in another row. I continued to erase, barely aware of what I was seeing until all the fields were exposed. Oh, my God, I whispered, staring at the ticket. What is it? Mom asked, coming closer. I looked up at my family standing in the snowy driveway and felt a strange calm descend upon me. I won, I said simply. 3.5 million rubles. The taxi driver, a middle-aged woman named Valentina, with a calm voice and a car that smelled of vanilla air freshener, seemed to sense that I was in no mood to chat. In my hand, the lottery ticket felt incredibly light for something worth 3.5 million rubles. I stuffed it into my purse, ignoring the immediate change in my stunned family's demeanor. Dad suddenly offered to push-start my car. Mom insisted that I stay for Christmas dinner. Even Yusha became obliging, offering to help me find out how to get my winnings. I turned them all down, keeping a straight face as I climbed into Valentin's car and waved goodbye. Only now, as I drove further away from my childhood home, did I allow myself to process what had happened. Not millions, not enough to retire or buy a mansion, but enough to make a significant difference to my current circumstances, enough to matter. Everything all right back there? Valentina asked, meeting my eyes in the rearview mirror. Looks like you saw a ghost. I just won some money, I said, surprising myself with my admission, in the lottery. It seems that all these events happened for a reason, Valentina wisely noted. The ways of the universe are inscrutable. My phone was constantly vibrating with messages and calls from my family, but I turned off the sound. By the time Valentina dropped me off at my house, I had made my decision. The money, my money, would be used thoughtfully, purposefully. This winning would be the foundation for the independent life I had been building all along. In my apartment, the silence was a welcome relief. I sat down at my small kitchen table with a notepad and began planning. After taxes, I calculated that I would receive about 3 million rubles, still a significant amount. I mentally divided the money, 1 million for a reliable used car, 1 million to pay off my student loans, 500,000 for an emergency fund, and another 500,000 to immediately improve the quality of life in my apartment. As I wrote down the numbers, a weight lifted off my shoulders. My phone buzzed again, 17 missed calls, 29 text messages. I quickly looked through them. Mom, please call us, we're worried. Dad, let's talk about this like adults. Case Yusha. OMG, Larissa, I can't believe you won, call me. Mom, your dad says we can help you invest this money wisely. Case Yusha, you're mad at me. It's not my fault they gave me the car. I put the phone down without answering. My needs came first this time. Instead, I called my friend Svetlana, the only person I knew would understand without judgment. Merry Christmas, she replied cheerfully. How's the family circus going? Sveta, you won't believe what happened, I said and told her everything. Wow, was her eloquent response when I finished. It's like karma on steroids. I laughed, the first real laugh I'd had in days. What are you going to do? She asked. Besides telling my family to go to hell, which they totally deserve, by the way. I have a plan, I said, looking at my notebook. Mostly practical stuff. Cars, loans, savings. What about the family situation? Sveta asked. Are you going to tell them to kiss your financially improved ass or what? I don't know, I sighed again. Part of me wants to cut off all communication with them. The other part knows that they are still my family, no matter what they are. Family doesn't necessarily mean tolerating toxic dynamics, Sveta noted. Sometimes the healthiest thing is distance. The week between Christmas and New Year was a whirlwind. I applied to the lottery commission, opened a separate savings account for my winnings, and looked for reliable used cars. On the third day after Christmas, I visited a used car dealership. Saleswoman Alina was refreshingly forthright. This just came in, she said, showing me a 3-year-old, low-mileage Skoda Octavia. One owner, all service records, no accidents, boring but reliable as a tank. I drove it, appreciating the smooth ride and quiet engine. By the end of the day, I had signed the paperwork. Driving home in my new Skoda, I felt a surge of pride that had nothing to do with the car itself, but with making a sound decision for my future. At home, I checked my phone and found a new message from Case Yusha. So you're buying a Ferrari with your lottery money. Lol, just kidding. But seriously, what are you buying? And Mom and Dad are acting weird and always talking about you in hushed tones. Call me. I put the phone face down on the table without answering. Not once did any of them acknowledge the legitimacy of my feelings or the inequality I pointed out. A week after Christmas, while I was making arrangements with a company to remove my old furniture, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and when I looked through the peephole, I saw the last people I expected to see, my parents, standing awkwardly in the hallway of my building. For a moment, I considered pretending I wasn't home, but they probably saw the lights in the windows, and my new car, was clearly visible in my parking space. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door. Mom, Dad, what a surprise! I sounded calmer than I felt. Can we come in? Mom finally asked. I stepped aside, allowing them to enter my small apartment. Their eyes immediately began to take in the changes. A new dark gray sofa, a solid wooden dining table instead of the rickety IKEA model, a new rug. You've been shopping, Dad noted, his tone carefully neutral. I brought them coffee, determined to maintain the emotional boundaries I'd spent the last week building. We were worried about you, Larissa, Dad said. You didn't answer our calls. I told you I needed time, I reminded. At that moment, a car honked outside. Mom went to the window. Is it a new car? She asked, surprised. In your parking space? Yes, I confirmed. A used Skoda Octavia, very practical. You bought the car? Dad seemed genuinely shocked. Without consulting us? The absurdity of his response almost made me laugh. Dad, I'm 29 years old. I don't need to consult you about my purchases. But he did start with the lottery money, and he seemed to realize that he was giving himself away. Ah, I said softly. Now we come to the main point. You didn't come because you were worried about me. You came because you were worried about what I might do with the money. That's not fair, Larissa, Mom said with resentment in her voice. Really? Because none of the texts or calls I've received have given me any indication of how I might feel after Christmas. It's just call us and be careful with that money. We may not have been perfect, Dad finally conceded. But family helps family. Hasn't that always been our philosophy? It was, but I challenged it because from my point of view it looks more like family helps Case Yusha. Your sister needs more support, Mom insisted. She's struggling because you've never let her face consequences, I countered. She's failing a session. You hire her a tutor. She can't hold a job. You pay her bills. She wants a car. You buy her a Lexus. When did you ever make her stand on her own 2 feet? Enough, I raised my hand, stopping him. I've been thinking a lot about our family this week, and I've made some decisions. I took a deep breath. I won't give you or Case Yusha any money. Not for insurance, not for school, not for anything. The lottery winnings are mine, and I use them responsibly. And from now on, I set clear boundaries. I love you both and want to have a relationship with you, but it has to be a healthy relationship based on mutual respect. That means acknowledging favoritism and working to change it. My phone vibrated on the table. Message from Case Yusha. So, did Mom and Dad find you? They should have asked about help with insurance. The Lexus turned out to be much more expensive to insure than Dad thought. Lol. I turned the phone screen towards my parents so they could read the message. Mom closed her eyes for a moment, and Dad's face flushed. She doesn't know we're here, he said weakly. Stop lying, I said, suddenly tired of it all. Just stop. Finally, Mom said quietly, we have to go. This isn't going the way we hoped. As he left, Dad made one last attempt. Think about what you're doing, Larissa, turning your back on your family because of money. I'm not turning my back on anyone, I interrupted. I simply refuse to participate in dysfunctional patterns. When you're ready to acknowledge the problems and work on them, I'll be here. Until then, I have my own well-being to attend to. Not 5 minutes had passed when my phone rang. Case Yusha, what did you tell Mom and Dad? She demanded. They just called me. They say some nonsense about me having to become independent. Aren't you going to help with the insurance? That's so selfish, Larissa. Goodbye, Case Yusha, I said calmly and ended the conversation. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was truly in control of my relationship with my family. 6 months had passed, the lottery money had been spent exactly as planned, but the most significant changes were not financial, but internal. I had limited contact with my parents, foregoing family holidays to set boundaries. Case Yusha, faced with reality, was forced to trade in her Lexus for a more practical car, and after failing another course, took responsibility and signed up to take it again in the summer. Last week, for the first time in her life, she asked me for budgeting advice. At work, my new focus paid off. I was promoted to senior designer. I even started dating someone, a Roman, a software engineer I met on a hike. In early June, a letter arrived from my parents, a real paper letter. Inside was a card with a simple message in Mom's handwriting. Dear Larissa, we have been thinking a lot these past months. The distance between us has been painful, but perhaps necessary. She made us look at patterns we weren't even aware of. We were wrong. We can't change the past, but we can acknowledge it and try to be better. If you're ready, we'd like to start rebuilding our relationship on healthier terms. With love, Mom and Dad. That was the beginning, that one step I wasn't sure they would ever take. My answer was measured. I suggested meeting for coffee on neutral territory. The anxiety I expected to feel was not there. Curiosity took its place. The Christmas that had been so devastating had ultimately been transformative. Not because of the lottery win, though that certainly helped in practical ways, but because it had pushed me to recognize my own worth and demand that others recognize it, too. The greatest gift I received wasn't money. It was the realization that I had the power to change my story, to stop accepting the role I was put into, and to write a new one for myself.